and beverages in groceries and in restaurants, children's toys, print newspapers and printed books. And it's estimated that the average family will spending $2,000 on qualifying goods, especially if they live in Ontario or Atlantic Canada, where the HST will also be removed, will save about $360 over the 2-month period. I want to ask my colleague, does he say that saving people $360 is chump change? Is that what he's telling families, that $360 means so little to him that it's chump change to him? Well,
the honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, this isn't a tax cut. This is an inflationary tax trick. It temporarily takes the tax off of things like cheese puffs and pennies off of Pringles. If that member really has the courage to face Canadians for once, instead of them propping up this corrupt Prime Minister for the greed of their leader's $2.2 million pension, they should put Canadians over their leader's pension. Call a carbon tax election now so common sense Conservatives can fire all these clowns and we can replace them with a common sense Conservative government that will axe the tax for good.
Point of order, the honourable member from Vancouver Kingsway.
I would ask my honourable colleague to withdraw that comment. Calling parliamentarians clowns in this place is unparliamentary and it's unbecoming him. I ask for him to withdraw that comment immediately.
Just one moment, just one moment, please. Can I just... The honourable member from Perth Wellington is rising on the same point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say that it is offensive to clowns to be compared to the NDP.
Point of order. Colleagues, the honourable member from London, Fanshawe, rising on the same point of order.
I think that are warranted, considering the former colleagues, the former comments from the colleague from Perth Wellington.
I'm going to just... so the honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn used language which I would say would not be conducive to making sure that a debate can happen here, but because it wasn't directed at a particular member, usually there's a lot of latitude in terms of the language which is being involved. So we're going to move on. The honourable member, l'honorable député de Manicouagan.
The honourable member from Manicouagan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I go ahead? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member who is rising on a point of order, the honourable member from Port McMoody, Quitland.
Speaker, I also wanted to point out that the member said he was going to fire the clowns. It was directed at people, and he doesn't have any power to fire anyone, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Power over people do not.
I thank the honourable member. That is, the Speaker has already ruled on that. L'honorable député de...
The honourable member from Manicouagan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We can see that sometimes it's hard to give a speech, even a constructive speech. Now, we want this in committee, but that's a bit of a problem. We're talking on both sides of the House about hypocrisy, but in my opinion, I think it's a pity when you can't really defend a bill where the products on the list are completely arbitrary. And people in Canada think it's just an election gimmick. Now, this is the impression that people have, that it's, and they're improvising, making it up as they go along. The honourable member for Forest Lawn.
This plan or policy was written on the back of a napkin and put together as quickly as possible to try to distract away from the pain and misery this Liberal NDP has caused Canadians for the last 9 years, or the fact that inside this House we've been discussing for the last 2 months about the absolute corruption by this government that keeps on happening. It's just another ethics scandal under this government's belt that, of course, the NDP keeps propping up.
Time for one more question for the member from Marion. The member from Barrie Innisfil is dreaming in Technicolor. Question. Sorry, reprise du débat.
Resuming debate. Resuming debate. The honourable member for Laurentides-Labelle.
Improvisation.
Yes. This is an improvisation. Liberals and NDP on the stage, improvising, both plummeting in the polls and about to bring in closure. I think we're witnessing a really bad improvisation act. Now, they're ready to put on a show, I guess, but I'm rather ashamed that this is happening. I wish this was a joke, Mr. Speaker, or even a comedy sketch, but unfortunately it's not. What we're seeing here is a complete improvisation on the part of this government and its dance partner. I haven't met one person in my riding who wanted a tax holiday, because this would have a direct impact on businesses and would help very few people, because it just wouldn't. When you're using all your income, when you're spending it on essentials, well, this tax holiday will not help much. You know, there's no tax on rent. There's no tax on food in grocery stores, but heating is taxed. But these geniuses have left the tax on heating. But alcohol is not taxed. So if I decide to go to a restaurant and pay for a great bottle of wine, I think that I should pay the GST on a luxury product. But no, Mr. Speaker, they have decided that it's a good idea that those who can pay for a bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne, and they might, some people might during the holidays, they should get their tax discount. But, Mr. Speaker, I checked this morning on the, and I saw that Veuve Clicquot is sold for $84. 750 mil. I would say that was a luxury product. So we have a tax holiday for the well-off. Because when you have the bare minimum in your bank account, when you have to count every single dollar, when every single expenditure counts, and rather, now I heard the member for Alfred Pellon, it's getting late, Mr. Speaker, he said that it would help business people, business owners. Now, you really have to be out of touch to say something like this. They considered this so little thought went into this. There are business people who are barely managing to keep their businesses in business. I'm thinking of someone who owns a bistro in my riding. The owner contacted me, and he said, this is completely idiotic. He said, there's one technician for about 300 businesses who can reprogram the cash registers. So they have to get this changed before the 14th of December, and then they have to change it back again for the 14th of February. Can't do it. So it's double standard. This is a bill where people are going to have to hire a technician twice in 2 months. And this is going to cost them. And the profit margins for restaurant owners will be minimal. I think that people in the business ecosystem, in the small business ecosystem, are going to be hard hit because the Liberals and the NDP, who are in the basement where the polls are concerned, have come up with a gimmick that they think may help them somewhat. But let's be clear, that's what they're doing. I'm thinking about businesses that have to ship goods all over Canada. Now, they are invoicing people according to the provinces where these things are being sent. So, this will not help businesses. It'll help the big multinationals and department stores. There's no store on the main street in Saint-Sauveur or Mont-Tremblant or Laurier that are applauding this measure.
They are, in fact, very stressed, and they're wondering how they will make ends meet. It's so incomprehensible that supposedly left-leaning parties want to benefit the wealthy. It makes no sense whatsoever. Now, we know that the Liberals will accuse us of voting against their bill. I can already hear them saying the Bloc isn't voting for it, the Bloc is against it. But they are underestimating people's intelligence. They're underestimating us. We will vote against it because it is bad for Quebec and it is bad for Quebecers. People are struggling to feed their families. People have to line up at St. Vincent de Paul or at the food bank. A tax break, a little GST break, is not what's going to help people. What will help them is true help. This bill seeks to help the most well-off spend more. They would rather help the lofty left and the champagne socialists and the wealthy rather than who actually need help. Now, in provinces where there is a harmonized sales tax, no one in the government, not the finance minister or the minister of intergovernmental affairs, no one in their cabinet thought it might be a good idea to forewarn the provinces. The provinces found out about this 24 hours ahead of time, just before the press conference in a fancy kitchen in Toronto. That shows that this government, in fact, disrespects provincial governments. This also proves that this measure was drawn up in half a second on a napkin. No one gave it any real thought. But there's more. This might be news to English Canadians, but in Quebec, Revenue Quebec collects GST. Meanwhile, the NDP Liberal coalition, people love to say that, I'm going to say it too, that coalition didn't even consider that factor. And these aren't huge sums, Mr. Speaker, but it just goes to show how last minute and hasty this legislation is. Now, I'll wrap up. I'm totally opposed to this bill. I will not vote in support of a tax break for the wealthiest. I care too much about people who have real needs right now, who are experiencing serious precarity and vulnerability. And then other parties will criticize us for being against supporting the wealthy. Well, they can come and see us, and I will introduce them to real Canadians with real needs. Taxes exist to help people. To the people of Laurentides-Labelle, let me tell you that the government is not doing its job properly. They're throwing this botched legislation in our faces. Business owners are stressed. And now we're being gagged. There's a closure motion. That is an insult to our duties and responsibilities as legislators. Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I must say, I am disappointed in the Bloc. Disappointed in the Bloc because what we see is what I would suggest to you is an unholy alliance between the double blue, where we have the Bloc siding with the Conservatives, not recognizing the true value of giving constituents throughout the country a holiday GST tax break. To try to give the impression that giving that tax break is something in which her constituents would not support, I believe ultimately, Mr. Speaker, is not fully the truth. Because at the end of the day, I believe people deserve it, and providing that holiday GST tax break is a good thing, and we should all be supporting it.
I don't know why they're against.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. But every time we vote with another party, there is, in some form, an alliance. But as I've already said, Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois always asks itself the following question. Is this good for Quebec? If yes, we vote yes. If not, we vote no. We care about Quebec and Quebecers. We don't vote against things just because we're an opposition party, Mr. Speaker. We're voting against this for all of the reasons I listed. This bill makes no sense, it's not being sent to committee, and it would only last for 2 months.
The honourable member from Vancouver Kingsway.
I have a simple question from my colleague. How is helping struggling Quebecers by sending them several $100s during a very expensive time of life during the holiday system, how is that bad for Quebecers or Quebec?
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Well, Mr. Speaker, for a person earning a salary of $100,000 a year, they're able to buy luxury products with a discount. All right, that's one thing. But what about those lining up at food banks, Mr. Speaker, who are just trying to buy basic essential products? People who make purchases, they're struggling to make basic purchases. They will not go to the restaurant, even with this measure. If we really want to help them, we need to go right to the source. We need to give people a roof over their heads, food to eat, and a minimum amount of money in their pockets.
Honourable member from Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And my question for my colleague from the Bloc Québécois is quite specific to the provincial jurisdiction side of this. I know there's a number of agreements that have been signed with provinces that have harmonized sales tax, and then also for those provinces that just have the GST or have the GST and HST, there are aspects to the act that governs that actually, it seems like what the government has proposed, what the Liberal government has proposed, supported by the NDP, would actually be in violation of that things, which would then, in fact, be a direct attack on provincial jurisdiction. I'm wondering if my colleague from the Bloc could talk about if she's heard that, if she's had a chance to look into the impacts that this bill would have, and the possible impacts that may be that would specifically be related to Quebec, and I know would be similar to the province of Alberta and those other jurisdictions that have HST.
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Mr. Speaker, I'll say quickly that in Quebec our system is different, and there will be issues, a shortfall, but what will this actually accomplish for individual Canadians or Quebecers? Now, I'm no tax expert. This is, of course, a huge, complex issue. There will be major impacts. There will be tax impacts. There will be impacts for businesses when they file their tax reports. But in Quebec, this will just be harmful and annoying. There will be many collateral consequences.
From Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Millions of Canadians are struggling to make ends meet. We have a cost of living crisis and an economy that is seeing an ever widening gap between the wealthy and the rest of us. A few stark facts bear this out. According to Statistics Canada, nearly half of Canadians report that rising prices are greatly affecting their ability to meet day-to-day expenses. Rent has increased by over 21%, and grocery foods have increased by over 20% over the last 3 years. According to Equifax Canada, 50% of Canadians are now living paycheck to paycheck. Income inequality in Canada has hit the highest level ever recorded. The top 20% of Canadians hold more than 2/3 of our country's wealth. By comparison, the bottom 40% of Canadians account for only 2.8% of our country's wealth. Wow. According to the Salvation Army, 1 in 4 parents cut back on their own food consumption to ensure their children had enough food to eat this year. 8 in 10, 80% of Canadians now believe that owning a home in Canada is now only for the rich. 7 in 10 say they have given up on ever owning a home. A majority of Canadians say thinking about holiday spending causes them financial anxiety. And 80% plan on cutting back on spending during this holiday season in a few short weeks. That's why the NDP recently pledged to permanently remove the GST from daily essentials and monthly bills, such as grocery store items, including pre-prepared meals, diapers, children's clothing, internet, home phone and cell phone bills, and all types of home heating. Note that all of these items are unavoidable expenses. Everyone has to heat their residence, buy food at the grocery store, and cell phones and internet are now essential utilities. That's right. We estimate our plan would save an average family over $500 per year. Now, this commitment stands in stark contrast with the Conservatives' proposed cuts to essential programs like dental care, child care, and pharmacare. Losing that support would cost families thousands of dollars per year. That's money they can't afford. Yep. Now, we would finance this permanent tax cut with an excess profits tax paid by very large corporations that abuse their monopoly market power and unjustifiably hike their profit margins. Canadians should know that excess profit or windfall taxes are used worldwide, including in the United Kingdom, Spain, and Australia. In fact, Canada has a history of using excess profits taxes. During both world wars, excess profits taxes were implemented to help fund the war effort and ensure that companies did not engage in profiteering. Yep. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has estimated that an excess profit tax would have generated almost $8 billion in federal revenues for the 2020 year. Yep. Now, the Liberal government responded to the NDP's tax-free essentials plan, but in true Liberal fashion, only partially. Yeah. They instead proposed a 2-month GST holiday on certain items starting December 14th and a one-time payment of $250 delivered in the spring 2025 for individuals who reported net employment income of up to $150,000 in 2023. They have completely ignored the NDP's call for an excess profits tax on large corporations who are making huge, historic profits. Yep. This is far from the substantial, fair, and permanent relief the NDP wants to give Canadians. Mm-hmm. As usual, the Liberals are letting people down with their choice to make this a short-term tax holiday on a limited list of items. Their scheme also largely fails to capture the life essentials that the NDP plan does by leaving out things like home heating and cellular and internet bills. We are profoundly disappointed that the Liberals have chosen to exclude the most vulnerable Canadians from their one-time payment proposal. The Liberals have perversely chosen to send checks to individuals earning $149,000 a year or couples earning $298,000 a year, but not to seniors on fixed incomes of $25,000 or people with disabilities so severe that they can't work. Mm-hmm. Mr. Speaker, that completely defies logic and fairness. Mm-hmm. Now, this plan was announced without consultation or negotiation with the NDP. Our position is that everyone under the income threshold should receive the $250 payment, and we will not support the Liberals' rebate payment unless this support is expanded to include everyone in need. Now that is why the NDP forced the Liberals to split these two measures into two, so that we can proceed with the GST holiday right away to give people immediate relief while we continue to pressure the Liberals to fix the $250 benefit to include all vulnerable Canadians.
That's right.
New Democrats will vote for the GST holiday proposed in the legislation before us today because working and middle-class families are desperate for relief, even if it is temporary and less than ideally aimed. We will continue to campaign hard on permanently scrapping the GST on daily essentials and on monthly bills. And we will continue to fight for a fair taxation system where the rich pay their fair share and all working and middle-class Canadians can live comfortable lives with dignity. Now, a few words on the bill before the House. This legislation amends the Excise Tax Act in order to implement a temporary GST-HST holiday between December 14th and February 15th, 2025 on qualifying goods. This will help Canadians by lowering the cost of a range of products that are particularly needed during the upcoming holiday season. These include children's clothing, footwear, and diapers, children's car seats, food and beverages in groceries and in restaurants, children's toys including games, building sets, puzzles, and video consoles, print newspapers, printed books, and even Christmas trees or similar decorative trees. Now, removing the GST from these goods for 2 months will provide an estimated $1.6 billion in federal tax relief. A family spending $2,000 on qualifying goods will realize GST savings of at least $100 over the 2-month period, but in provinces where the HST will also be removed, Ontario and in the Atlantic provinces, further savings will be realized. The same 2,000 basket of qualifying purchases will realize a savings of $260 over a 2-month period. Now, the Liberals' plan to only offer temporary GST relief not only provides less than half the relief to families that the NDP's plan does, but it will also present a significant burden on businesses, especially small businesses, who have to adjust their cash registers and payment systems twice in 2 months. That is yet more reason that the NDP plan to permanently eliminate the GST on these essential items is better for business and better for consumers.
Hear, hear.
Now, I'd like to address one of the major reasons that Canadians are feeling such economic pressure. That's corporate price gouging. New Democrats understand that the inflation of the last 2 years was not caused by unreasonable wages or increased demand by consumers or even by excess government spending. It was caused by corporations who inflated prices.
That's right.
Canadians are eating the same food they did before inflation. They're driving the same cars, the same mileage they did before inflation. Frankly, people are probably eating and driving less. Governments have been running large deficits for almost 20 years by both Conservative and Liberal administrations without causing rampant inflation.
Yep, that's a Conservative.
So that cannot possibly explain why grocery prices are through the roof, suppliers are shrinking their portions, and oil companies jacked up their gas prices. Here are the real facts. Profit margins surged in early 2022 following the COVID pandemic, where many sectors used the cover of the pandemic as an excuse to raise prices.
Yep.
Despite the normalization of supply chains, easing of shortages, and weaker consumer demand, aggregate corporate profits hardly changed in 2023. Last year, corporations in Canada recorded $644 billion in pre-tax profits, 54% higher than in 2019, the last pre-pandemic year, and over double the average profit level of the pre-pandemic decade.
Agreed.
A quick look at 3 highly concentrated industries, the grocery, telecom, and oil and gas sectors, reveal this clearly. Coming out of the pandemic, operating profits in the oil and gas sector increased tenfold, from $6.6 billion in 2019 to $66 billion in 2022. That's the highest profit ever recorded in Canadian history.
Wow.
Grocery giant profits margin doubled from 2% pre-pandemic to 4.1% in 2023. A 1% point increase in gross margins at grocery stores adds over $1 billion to Canadians' food bills. And last, Mr. Speaker, the telecom sector reported total revenues of $66.8 billion in 2022, another all-time high. So, Mr. Speaker, why do we have high prices in Canada? Because large corporations raise them. Why do we have a problem with productivity in Canada? Because corporations are not investing in machinery, equipment, technology, employee training.
Yes.
The NDP will continue to fight for working and middle-class Canadians and bring a fair taxation system in this country so everyone has a real shot at a good life in this country.
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Louis.
To my honourable colleague, we've heard a lot about the cost of food being higher in Canada than in the United States, and that's true, but there are many reasons for that. One is economies of scale. The United States has a much larger population. It's the same reason why the price of food is lower in cities in Canada than in the regions, but there's another reason, and that is that wages are much lower in the United States. The minimum wage is much lower. For example, in Canada, the minimum wage ranges from 13 to 16.77. In the United States, the federal minimum wage is 7.25. Does the member not agree that the Conservative recipe for high food prices is keeping wages low? Does the member not agree that the Conservatives are fake friends of Labour?
The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Well,
Yes.
to say the word Conservatives and Labour in the same sentence is an oxymoron, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I've been in this House 16 years, and I've watched the Conservatives vote every single time to order striking workers back to work. I've watched them oppose every single minimum wage hike that's ever been proposed. I watched them try to increase the retirement age from 65 to 67. Now, you know what? If you work in the House of Commons, that's one thing, but if you're a bricklayer, or you're a roofer, or you're a drywaller, or you're a carpet layer, you try to work when you're 67 years of age, and that's what the leader of the Conservative Party, when he was in the Harper government, he proposed and supported that. The Conservatives not only are no friends of Labour, they will make life harder for every worker in this country.
That's right.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable member from Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 9 years, and in particular over the last 3 years, we've watched the NDP enable all of the corruption and incompetence of this Liberal government, and it's really been on display with how this bill came into being. The NDP and Liberals seem to be, somewhere writing on the back of a cocktail napkin, trying to cobble together some kind of a bill that could distract Canadians from the corruption that we have seen, wherein the Liberals have let insiders profit from their slush funds. So will the member explain just why they keep propping up this Liberal government?
The honourable member. Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member from Vancouver Kingsway.
You know, I serve with the honourable member in the Finance Committee, and you would think that someone on the Finance Committee would be quite careful with numbers. There was a majority Liberal government in this country from 2015 to 2019. Nobody was propping up that government. They were a majority government. Yet the honourable member says 9 years. I mean, that's just factually incorrect. I wouldn't trust that member or that party with running a popsicle stand if they can't even get basic numbers like that correct. And also that they're so ethically slippery that they will continue to use propaganda, nursery rhyme politics like that to try to confuse Canadians.
That's right.
So and the other thing I'll just say is this: is that the Conservatives are proposing a cut in the carbon tax, but they're opposing a cut in the GST. Yeah. Try to explain that to Canadians. I certainly
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments?
Order, please. Order. The honourable member for Nunavut.
And I'd like to thank my colleague for his excellent speech this evening. I wanted to ask him by prefacing that Nunavut has a birth rate that's double the national rate, meaning that there's a lot of expenses that Nunavut Mute have to spend for including diapers and children's clothing. And I wonder if the member can share for us what this will actually mean for Nunavut Mute, knowing that they'll have some relief, understanding that Nunavut's birth rate is double the national rate.
A brief answer, if possible, for the member from Vancouver Kingsborough.
Thank you. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for a question and take this moment to say I think she's the most powerful speaker in this entire House of Commons.
You're here. You're here. You're here.
You know, one thing I have to say that's disturbing me listening to the speeches is the disdain and the elitism that I hear coming from the Conservatives. You know, by talking about you know, Pringles and cheese puffs and how this is insignificant and it's chump change shows absolute disrespect and a lack of understanding for the real life of most working families in this country. And my honourable colleague raises, you know, for people up in the north who have to spend money on diapers and footwear and clothing, and there's probably, you know, for people in harsher climates, there's probably additional clothing expenses. This will give real relief. And yet the Conservatives scoff at that. Yeah. And I find for people who make, in this House of Commons, $200,000 a year, to scoff at hundreds of dollars going to some of the poorest people in this country is frankly shameful.
It's shameful.
Resuming debate, the honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a tough debate because we were told about the original plan that there would be a $250 check to certain Canadians, but not to those most in need, to people who worked in 2023, which wouldn't include many people living on very fixed and small incomes, on disability and seniors. And we were the first party to notice that that wasn't a fair plan. On November 22nd, we put out a statement that how could we give a check to $250 to some Canadians, but failed to notice that it wouldn't apply to retired Canadians living on fixed income. It wouldn't apply to people living on disability. After all the time that we have in this House called for disability tax benefit, still not delivered. The disability benefit has still not been delivered, and this $250 check was dangled out there. We don't know where it's gone now because as of the last, I guess, 24 hours, it crystallized that we were only going to be debating this place, fast-tracking a GST tax holiday on only certain goods that would be qualified as necessities and only for a 2-month period in and around Christmas at a cost of $1.6 billion from the Treasury of Canada. I tell you, this is a tough issue. It's less difficult now that they've pulled away the $250 that should have been targeted to people who needed it most. Who knows, maybe that will come back to us in some other form. But there's something about this, Mr. Speaker. I struggle with it. I have to say, probably knowing how much Canadians need a break right now, I don't know that I can vote against a GST tax holiday on certain goods over a 2-month period. But I have to say, it makes me feel queasy. It makes me feel like I'm voting for something that Doug Ford would have come up with. In fact, I think Doug Ford did come up with it. And it's not good policy. Whether it's good politics, we'll see. A GST tax break on certain items. I heard earlier from a Conservative in this place that it wouldn't apply to jigsaw puzzles. And I thought, well, we don't have to worry about that. We've all seen the Conservative commercials. We know the leader of the official opposition has jigsaw puzzles. We get to see them on TV quite a lot. It's not good policy when it's not targeted to people who need it the most. And it's not good policy when it's $1.6 billion without saying, we're going to pay for that, by the way, with an excess profits tax on the big grocery stores and their corporate management and corporate greed. It's not good policy when we don't say that we're going to actually pay for this GST tax holiday by finally applying an excess profit tax on big oil and the obscene levels of corporate profits they've been making, especially since Putin invaded Ukraine, which amounts essentially to war profiteering by big oil. So we struggle with this, and as Greens we struggle with it because we know Canadians need a break on things that are essentials. But this is a very complicated list of what's an essential and what isn't. And it isn't permanent. So we look at this as a 2-month break over the holidays. It's transparently a vote buying scheme. But it's transparently a vote buying scheme. But does it deliver relief to people who need it the most right now? It certainly is. It's of benefit. You look at the Canadian Institute of Independent Small Businesses. They're very clear that the retail sector doesn't see that this is going to help them a lot through the Christmas season, but it will help restaurants, both in restaurant meals and takeaways. And that is a perk for families and people who've been pinching pennies to say, okay. But the people who've been pinching pennies and not going out for restaurant meals are not the same people lining up at the food banks. So I have to say it's rare for me, Mr. Speaker, to deliver, and to my colleagues here, to struggle with how to vote on something. I'm usually pretty darn sure from the get-go. I read a bill and I think, well, this is something I can get behind. This is something I believe in. Bottom line, what do Canadians really need right now? We need a comprehensive security policy that protects us from the ravages of the climate crisis, which itself drives up grocery prices, which makes food more expensive, which makes life in Canada more precarious for those who live in floodplains, who are flooded year after year, or who are in communities that get fire evacuation orders year after year, who live with the ongoing trauma, of the effect of living through a heat dome in British Columbia, the numbers of people who still feel that trauma, or the trauma after Hurricane Fiona. We need comprehensive policy that makes sense. And while the Conservatives want to break and axe the carbon tax, that tax is rebated to people. The GST is something that was put in place under the Mulroney government. The GST is overall not a progressive tax. Everybody pays it, and if you're buying really big luxury items, you're going to pay more. This tax holiday for a 2-month period is at least not designed around really large luxury goods. It says it's about the necessities that Canadians need, like car seats and diapers. I just had a baby granddaughter. My gift to my daughter for her baby, Lily, won't get a GST tax break because it's a service. For my daughter and my granddaughter, they'll never see a throwaway diaper because they're buying cotton diapers, and I got them a laundry service. That actually saves people a lot of money. Buying throwaway diapers costs about $6,000 a year for the average infant. Buying cloth diapers up front costs a bit more. It's just the work and the labor for a new mom to have to do all that laundry, and it's usually the new mom and not the new dad. So I don't want to dive into all the questions of what it really costs in our society, where you can save money by doing things differently, by avoiding the throwaway, by investing in something that's a service in community where there's a small business that delivers every week clean and healthy cloth, cotton diapers for babies. That's not what anyone means when they talk about everybody needs diapers when you have a new baby. The whole time my daughter was in diapers, I didn't buy a throwaway diaper, not once, and I didn't suffer for my sacrifice. I had really good, reusable. I've still got one left. I treasure that one diaper left for my 33-year-old daughter because, my gosh, it's the best rag ever for washing up a mess. But you can't buy them anywhere. You just have to save them if you've actually been smart enough when you have a new baby to invest in cotton diapers. Really good product. I'm struggling with this, Mr. Speaker, because I don't know that a 2-month GST tax holiday on some goods and not others is what Canadians really need the most. What we really need to know is that we eliminate poverty, that we focus on food security for all, that we invest in our society with the kind of tax changes that make the biggest difference, and that we give Canadians the chance to know that this is a caring society that has eliminated poverty with a national, guaranteed, livable income for all. That makes real change. This makes small change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question et commentaire.
Questions and comments.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the House of Commons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that I would have thought, we all have an opportunity to do something very positive for our constituents. We know that things have been difficult, and providing them, a significant tax break for a holiday period. As the member said, it was a difficult decision for her. But at the end of the day, how do we say no to constituents in providing them a bit of support during that holiday time? And she makes reference to the restaurants, Mr. Speaker. Restaurants and those that are working that hospitality industry, it's going to have such a wonderful, positive impact. I think of February the 15th, the deadline. February the 14th is Valentine's Day. We know that's a busy time. I think there's many different benefits that are going to be there. And I'm wondering if her thoughts and to what degree it would have been better to have seen all members of the House actually support an initiative like this.
We'll move on to the honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands, but I just want to let members all know that I try to give them about 45 seconds to ask a question so that we can do a full round of questions and comments. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank my honourable colleague from the Liberal Party here. I know that Canadians are feeling a sense of deep anxiety about our future. For most people, the idea, when we go back to the question of affordability, to buy a home, but we also have people who are looking at living rough and living in encampments and living in tents. And I can hardly believe that in a country as wealthy as Canada, we're prepared to tolerate people living rough and outdoors in a country that has bitter winters. We can do better, and we must do better. And this is $1.6 billion that I can't help but feel could be spent in better ways than a short-term and very small, if welcome, benefit over Christmas. As I said, Mr. Speaker, and I say to my colleagues, probably vote for this, but I won't feel great about it.
Question et commentaire. L'honorable.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tonight, we're not voting against because we're the opposition. It's not because it's only helping a few people. We have to look at these measures as a whole. I won't ask my colleague why she's voting in favor, but I would like to ask her, does she believe that the government had properly thought out and analyzed this measure before proposing it and before we are to vote on it in the next few minutes? The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to my colleague from the Bloc. It is difficult, as I said. We need courageous politics. We need leadership that understands the difficulties around affordability, difficulties that are felt by our friends and families and Canadians. It's not something perfect, but it is good, and that is why I will be voting in favor. But as I said, we need to do more for our society, for the well-being of everyone, and especially for the well-being of populations that are missing on basic necessities. We need to help Indigenous populations, people with disabilities, people who are unhoused. These are populations in Canada that need our support.
One last question, a very brief one, the honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What we have before us is a tax trick, and that member called it a vote by. Through you, shouldn't all members be voting against this?
Thank the member for a brief question. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
My friend from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek. Fortunately for me, as a person who's in the Green Party, nobody tells me how to vote. This is a tough one, and I would share with my friend from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek. I'm sure she can think of people in her community who will wonder why she didn't vote for this, because they would have liked to have the same. I'm sorry, that's the reality. We need to think about the individuals who will hear about this on the news and think, I needed that. I wanted that, and that would have made my Christmas better. And for those people, I feel very, very much as though we go along with this, but we fight to make sure we can pay for it, and we do better for permanent change to help those people.
Comme il est 22h30.
It being 10:39, pursuant to order made earlier today, all questions necessary to dispose of the second reading stage of Bill C-78 are deemed put. A recorded division is deemed requested, and the vote shall not be deferred. Call in the members.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order. The question is as follows.
Nanda Sangari pour Madame Freeland, appuyé par...
For Ms. Freeland, seconded by Ms. Bibeau, moved that Bill C-78, an act respecting temporary cost of living relief, affordability, be now read a second time and referred to a committee of the whole.
La période de 10 minutes pour les députés votants.
The 10-minute electronic voting period has begun. The House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Ms. Gould.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Mr. Fraser.
Mr. Fraser.
Ms. Sachs.
Ms. Sachs.
Mr. McKay.
Mr. McKay.
Mr. Scarpellegia.
Mr. Scarpellegia.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Miss Cara.
Ms. Cara.
Miss Qualtrough.
Ms. Qualtrough.
Miss Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Madame Joly.
Madame Joly.
Madame Bibeau.
Madame Bibeau.
Mr. Hussain.
Mr. Hussain.
Mr. Ananda Sangari.
Mr. Ananda Sangari.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Lamour.
Mr. Lamour.
Mr. Fragascatos.
Mr. Fragascatos.
Mr. Bruson.
Mr. Bruson.
Mr. Vancouverdin.
Mr. Vancouverdin.
Mr. Batiste.
Mr. Batiste.
Mr. Kuzmarchuk.
Mr. Kuzmarchuk.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Yacono.
Mr. Yacono.
Mr. Nakvi.
Mr. Nakvi.
Mr. Sidhu Brampton East.
Mr. Sidhu Brampton East.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Sousa.
Mr. Sousa.
Mr. Maloney.
Mr. Maloney.
Mr. Kellaway.
Mr. Kellaway.
Miss Sidhu Brampton South.
Miss Sidhu Brampton South.
Mr. Sarbera.
Mr. Sorbara.
Miss Hepner.
Miss Hepner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Miss Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Weiler.
Mr. Weiler.
Ms. Bradford.
Ms. Bradford.
Mr. Chahal.
Mr. Chahal.
Mr. Koto.
Mr. Koto.
Madame Lapointe.
Madame Lapointe.
Ms. Taylor Roy.
Ms. Taylor Roy.
Ms. Matheson.
Ms. Matheson.
Ms. Idlout.
Ms. Idlout.
Mr. DeCharlie.
Mr. DeCharlie.
Ms. Cirillo.
Ms. Cirillo.
Ms. Kwan.
Ms. Kwan.
Ms. May, Saanich Gulf Islands.
Ms. May, Saanich Gulf Islands.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît,
Order.
so that the table officers can hear each other speak. Que tous ceux qui s'opposent à la motion
Will all those opposed please rise?
Mr. Bazan. Mr. Williams.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Dentel.
Mr. Denton.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Upal.
Miss Landsman.
Ms. Landsman.
Mr. Halan.
Mr. Halan.
Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Barrett.
Mrs. Gray.
Mrs. Gray.
Ms. Dancho.
Ms. Dancho.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kurek.
Mr. Kurek.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Berthold.
Monsieur Berthold.
Mr. Warkington.
Mr. Warkington.
Mr. Chong.
Mr. Chong.
Mr. Abul Taib.
Mr. Abu Tayyib.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Ms. Ferrari.
Ms. Ferrari.
Mrs. Block.
Mrs. Block.
Mr. Stewart Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Stewart Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Brassard.
Mrs. Goodrich.
Mrs. Goodrich.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Godin.
Mr. Godin.
Mr. Hoback.
Mr. Hoback.
Mr. Morantz.
Mr. Morantz.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Canna.
Mr. Canna.
Mrs. Cramp Nyman.
Mrs. Cramp Nyman.
Madame Bien.
Madame Bien.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Patzer.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Redicott.
Mr. Redicott.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Miss Rude.
Ms. Rude.
Mr. Généreux.
Mr. Généreux.
Mr. Major.
Mr. Major.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Martel.
Monsieur Martel.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Miss Rempel Garner.
Ms. Rempel Garner.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mrs. Falk, Battlefords Lloydminster.
Mrs. Falk, Battlefords Lloydminster.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. Weber.
Mr. Weber.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Mott.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Monsieur D'Entremont.
Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Kitchen.
Mr. Kitchen.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Madame Gill.
Madame Gill.
Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau.
Mr. Désilet.
Monsieur Désilet.
La Chambre attendra maintenant.
The House will now wait for the end of the electronic voting period before resuming its proceedings.
Je désire informer la Chambre que la période de vote électronique.
The electronic voting period has ended. If any members were not able to vote, please use the raise hand function now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My app was not working, and so I'd like to cast my vote in favor of the motion.
Mr. Davies, yay pour.
Nothing important, just a contact.
Le bureau va maintenant compiler les résultats.
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 176, 176. Nays contre 151, 151.
Je déclare la motion.
I declare the motion carried. Accordingly, pursuant to the order made earlier today, the bill is deemed referred to a committee of the whole, deemed considered in committee of the whole, deemed reported without amendment, deemed concurred in at report stage, and deemed read a third time and passed.
Lecture de ce projet de loi.
The Honourable Government House Leader is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that the House do now adjourn.
Alors, c'est... Est-ce que je peux... Sorry, I did not see. The motion to adjourn the House is now deemed to have been adopted. Accordingly, this House stands adjourned until tomorrow. Until tomorrow at 10 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24-1. Yeah.